I'm going to tell you what I saw on that Saturday in September of 1874, because I was there, and because some things deserve to be told the way they actually happened, not the way a small town decides to remember them when it wants to feel better about what it didn't do. My name is Dorothy Haines. 56 years old. Seamstress of Calverton, Colorado for 23 of them, which means I've dressed most of the women in this town for the most important occasions of their lives and heard, in the process, more than I probably should have. Seamstresses hear things. It's part of the work. I made Eliza Thorn's wedding dress. Eliza was 28, the schoolteacher at Calverton's one-room school, daughter of a farmer who had died 2 years before and left debts she'd spent those 2 years paying with her teacher's salary without complaining to anyone. The dress was ivory with a modest train, practical the way Eliza was practical, with particular care in the stitching at the collar that I put there because she deserved it. The groom was Gerald Marsh. A merchant from the next town over, well presented, with the kind of charm that sits well on the surface and doesn't go very deep. I had made his winter coat the year before. I knew what he was. I said nothing, because it wasn't my place, and because Eliza had looked at him at the first fitting with the expression of a woman who has been carrying something alone for a long time and has been offered someone to carry it with. I had hoped I was wrong about Gerald Marsh. I was not wrong. The wedding was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Gerald Marsh didn't come. Not at 10. Not at 10:30. Not at 11, when Pastor Webb came out a second time to check the street and came back with the expression of someone who knows the truth and is deciding how long to delay it. I was in the second row. I saw all of it. I saw the guests look at one another with the sideways attention of people who have understood something and are waiting for someone else to say it first. I saw the women make the small collective shift that meant they were preparing to leave. I saw Gerald Marsh's father, who had come from Denver specifically, slip out the side door without looking at anyone. I saw the next 15 minutes happen at the specific speed of the worst experiences, which is both too fast and too slow. And I saw, when Eliza finally came through the front door with the bouquet still in her hand and the veil still in place, I saw the only man standing outside not walk away. His name was Hank Reed. He was there because there was a repair needed on the sacristy roof Monday, and he had come to assess the materials. He had arrived while the wedding was in progress, understood from the organ that a ceremony was underway, and waited outside with the patience of a man who does not go where he hasn't been invited. I knew Hank Reed the way you know people in a town of 400, by sight, by reputation, by the shape of what others said, which was not much. 3 years in Calverton. A carpentry and repair business he ran with a reliability that impressed people who had hired him and perplexed those who hadn't, because reliability without sociability was a combination small towns found difficult to categorize. Not unfriendly. Not warm in the way that made people comfortable. He nodded when nodded to, answered what was asked. The general assessment, fine but strange. My assessment, a man who had learned, at some cost, to be careful about what he gave to people who hadn't indicated they would take care of it. I didn't know what had taught him that then. I know now. But that comes later. What I know about the church door that morning comes from 2 sources, what I saw through the windows as I followed the other guests out, and what Eliza told me herself 3 weeks later when she came to return the veil. Eliza came through the door and stopped on the top step. She was not crying. The version that circulated afterward had her weeping on the church steps. That is not what happened. What happened was she came through the door and stopped and stood very still with the bouquet at her side, looking at the street in the way of someone whose mind is working very fast through the implications of something it has just understood completely. The street was not empty. There were people. They were all finding reasons to look elsewhere. All except Hank Reed, who stood to the left of the door with a materials estimate in his hand, looking at her with the direct attention he brought to everything, without the discomfort everyone else was managing, without the performance of not having noticed. He said, "Is there somewhere you'd like to go?" Not, "Are you all right?" Not, "I'm so sorry." Just, "Is there somewhere you'd like to go?" Eliza told me, 3 weeks later, that the question surprised her enough to answer it. She'd like to sit down somewhere that wasn't here. He said there was a bench in the churchyard around the back. She said that was far enough. They walked around the side of the church. She sat. He stood nearby, not hovering, not performing concern, just present in the way of a person who has decided to stay, and she sat for 20 minutes while the world sorted itself out around what had happened. He did not fill the silence. She was grateful. She'd had enough of people filling silences with their own discomfort. At some point she put the bouquet down on the bench. He said, "I can take you home, or find someone who should be here." Either way. She asked who he'd find. He thought about it. "Mrs. Haines makes dresses." She seemed like someone who would know what to do. "She did make the dress," Eliza said. "I know," he said. "I saw it when I came in for the collar repair last spring. She does good work." Eliza told me this was the moment she understood he was not a stranger, not in the way that mattered. He had been in the same town for 3 years, paying attention to things. The dress in the window. The collar repair. The materials estimate. The woman on the church steps. Paying attention the whole time, without making a performance of it. She asked him to take her home. He did. He didn't come in. He made sure she was inside, then left. When I found out, from Eliza, not the town's version, I revised my understanding of Hank Reed upward considerably. The town's version was not accurate, which was typical. Calverton said Hank Reed had inserted himself into Eliza Thorn's situation, an interesting description of a man who had been standing outside a church and declined to walk away from someone having a very bad morning. The town was uncertain what to make of him. Was he interested in Eliza? Was it opportunistic? Appropriate? These were the questions Calverton asked. They were not, I noted, the questions anyone asked about Gerald Marsh, who had quietly left town in the days following the wedding and whose absence generated considerably less analysis than the behavior of the man who had stayed. I found this instructive. I thought it clearly enough that it probably showed on my face, which is a fault I've been working on for 56 years without notable progress. Eliza came to return the veil 3 weeks later. Tuesday afternoon, the shop quiet. She sat in the chair by the window while I put the veil away and told me what had happened outside the church. I asked how she was. "Better than I expected to be," she said. "Worse than I'm pretending." I appreciated the honesty. The kind you can work with. "Has he come by?" "I meant Hank Reed." She knew I meant Hank Reed. "Once. He brought a book he thought I might like. Left it at the door. Didn't come in." I thought about that decision, to bring something without requiring an interaction, to trust the gesture was enough without pressing for acknowledgement. "What kind of man brings a book?" I said. Eliza looked at me with the small expression she had, not quite a smile, but its beginning. "The reading kind," she said. What happened over the following months, I observed from the vantage point of a woman whose shop is on the main street and who has excellent windows. Hank Reed came to return the book in October. Stayed 20 minutes on Eliza's porch. He came back in November with a question about something he was building that required a woman's opinion. The most transparent excuse I had seen in 23 years of observing this town's courtship attempts, but also very like Hank Reed. The excuse was transparent, but the question was genuine, the opinion genuinely needed, and he listened to the answer with the full attention he brought to everything. He was not, I understood over those months, a man who performed. The pretenses he used were not manipulative. They were the gestures of a man who did not know how to initiate the thing he wanted directly, but who found genuine reasons to be present and, once present, was completely honest about what he was. It was a very particular kind of courtship. The kind that required the other person to be paying attention. Eliza was paying attention. She came to me in December. Not for a dress. For conversation, which was the surer signal. She sat by the window and told me Hank had asked her, very directly and without pretense, if she would be willing to take a walk with him on Sunday afternoon. She had said yes. She told me this with the expression of a woman who has been surprised by herself. He asked me once what made me decide to stay in Calverton, she said. After everything. After Gerald, after the wedding, after all of it. What did you tell him? I said. I told him I had nowhere else to go that was better. And he said he understood that. He said he'd stayed in Calverton for the same reason, and that it had seemed like enough until recently. I put down the fabric I was working with. What changed recently? I said. Eliza looked out the window at the December light coming in low and cold across the storefronts. He didn't say, she said. But I think I know. I thought she probably did. What I know about Hank Reed's history, I know from what Eliza told me later, when later had arrived and she was the kind of settled that allows for looking back. He had come from Missouri. Been in the war, Union side. Come out of it with the economy of a man who had learned to spend himself only on things that would hold. 2 other towns before Calverton. He didn't talk about why he'd left them. What he said once was that he had spent a long time looking for a place where the work was honest and the people didn't require him to be more than he was. Calverton had been approximately that. Not perfect. But enough, until it was more than enough, because there was a woman on a church step on a September morning who had looked at the street in the way he recognized, someone whose plan had just become irrelevant and who was deciding, with what they had, what came next. He had understood that look. He had not walked away from it. The Sunday walk became a regular arrangement. By the spring of 1875 it was the kind of presence that didn't require explaining. I watched it from my excellent windows with the satisfaction of someone who had made a good dress and seen it worn properly. Eliza came in March to talk about a different kind of dress. Not a wedding dress, not yet. Something for a Sunday that was going to be different from other Sundays, she said, with the careful understatement of a woman who has been embarrassed publicly and is not in any hurry to be again. I understood. I made her something simple and exactly right. Some things in this town have taught me to expect less than I should. Some things have reminded me to expect more. Hank Reed standing outside a church door on a September morning, declining to walk away, that was the second kind. I have not forgotten it. Neither has Eliza.